One, please, sir.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is a big day as we implement the biggest tax cut. For a decade, increasing national insurance thresholds to make tax lower and the tax burden easier. These changes will benefit 30 million people across the UK. And I'm pleased to say that two of those people are seated here in the public gallery today. Mandy Banfield and Alan Calzari, a typical worker, will now save £330 per year, with 70% of employees better off as a result. That is real money for real people. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the House will also join me in wishing the best of luck to England and Northern Ireland, who are competing in the UEFA Women's Euro 2022 tournament, which starts today, and I'm sure they will both make the nation proud. This morning, Mr. Speaker, I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I expect I shall have further such meetings later today.
Mr. Speaker, last week, a government minister was accused of sexually assaulting a young man. I want to quote the victim's account. He says, "He grabbed my arse and then he slowly moved his hand down in front of my groin. I froze." I accept that's not easy listening, but it's a reminder to all those propping up this Prime Minister just how serious the situation is. He knew the accused minister had previously committed predatory behaviour, but he promoted him to a position of power anyway. Why?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that individual, the member for Tamworth, no longer has the Conservative whip. He no longer has a job. He is no longer, as soon as I was made aware of the allegation that he has just read out, Mr. Speaker, and the complaint that was made, he lost his status as a Conservative MP, and he is now the subject, Mr. Speaker, of an independent investigation to the Complaints and Grievances panel. And that is entirely right. And I want to say to him, Mr. Speaker, I want to say to him that I abhor bullying and abuse of power anywhere in Parliament, in this party or in any other party.
And we've heard it all before. We know who he really is. Before he was found out, he's reported to have said he's handsy. That's the problem. Pincher by name, pincher by nature. Now, has the Prime Minister ever said words to that effect? And I'm not asking for bluster and half-truths. We've all had enough of that. Yes or no?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to trivialise what happened. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm not, because the very serious complaints have been raised against the member for Tamworth, and they're now being investigated, Mr. Speaker. It is true that a complaint was raised when he was in the Foreign Office, and the matter was resolved. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true, Mr. Speaker, that it was raised with me. I greatly regret that he continued in office, and I've said that. I have said that before, Mr. Speaker. I have said that before, Mr. Speaker. But it is now the subject of an independent investigation, and that is the right thing, Mr. Speaker. And frankly, I think the people of this country would like also to hear. They would like also to hear about other jobs that are held by people in this country, not least the 500,000 people we got off welfare into work in the last 6 months alone, Mr. Speaker. Those are things that are making differences to the lives of people up and down the country, and I'm proud of it.
Doesn't that just sum him up? Awful behaviour, unacceptable in any walk of life. It's there for all to see, but he ignores it. It was the same when his ally was on the take from the lobbyists. It was the same when his Home Secretary was bullying staff. It was the same when taxpayers' money was being abused. And it was the same when he and his mates parted their way through lockdown. Anyone quitting now, after defending all that, hasn't got a shred of integrity. Mr. Speaker, isn't this the first recorded case of the sinking ships fleeing the rat?
Mr. Speaker, look, he talks about he should hear what his lot say about him, Mr. Speaker. He talks about integrity. He wanted to install the member for Islington North into number 10, Mr. Speaker. That's what he wanted to do. Imagine what our country and what the world will be like now. He talks about integrity. He voted 48 times to overturn the will of the British people and take us back into the European Union. And by the way, listening to his muddled speech the other day, that is exactly what he would do again. Mr. Speaker, he talks about integrity, but Mr. Speaker, he has voted time and time again against sanctions on criminals that would put them behind bars. This is the government that is tough on... I'm sorry, he talks about integrity. He is himself facing a criminal investigation, Mr. Speaker, which he asked me to resign.
The only thing he's delivering is chaos. I started this session with a quote from the young victim in all this, how he froze when he was attacked. When I was prosecuting rapists, I heard that from victims all the time. Victims said they froze because it's not about sex. It's about power. And the power the disgraced government minister had was handed to him by that Prime Minister. And he's only in power because he's been propped up for months by a corrupted party defending the indefensible. So it's no longer a case about swapping the person at the top. Isn't it clear? The only way the country can get the fresh start it deserves is by getting rid of the lot of them.
Yesterday, in an attempt to boost morale in the tea room, the Prime Minister said at a table, but there were 7 people, MPs in the Carlton Club last week, and one of them should have tried to intervene to stop Chris from drinking so much. As if that wasn't insulting enough to the people who did try and intervene that night, and then also to the victims that drink was the problem. Isn't it the example, Mr. Speaker, but as the Prime Minister constantly tries to deflect from the issue, always tries to blame other people for mistakes, and that at least nothing left for him to do other than to take responsibility and resign.
Order! Can I just say, you ought to be embarrassed by clapping. This is not a debate. Mr. Esterson, it's not debating society. This is... This is Prime Minister's questions. I want to get through the questions as other people want to catch my eye, and the way to do it is not by clapping. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there's a very simple reason why they want me out, and that is because they know, Mr. Speaker, that otherwise we are going to get on and deliver our mandate and win another general election, and that is the reality, Mr. Speaker.
Does the Prime Minister think there are any circumstances in which he should resign?
I think, Mr. Speaker, clearly, if there were circumstances in which I felt it was impossible for the government to go on and discharge the mandate that we've been given, or if I felt, for instance, that we were being frustrated in our desire to support the Ukrainian people, or over some major point, then I would. But frankly, Mr. Speaker, the job of a Prime Minister in difficult circumstances when he's been handed a colossal mandate is to keep going, and that's what I'm going to do.
My goodness, nothing to see. We should all move on if we live in the world of the Prime Minister. You know, a few weeks ago I compared the Prime Minister to Monty Python's Black Knight. Actually, turns out I was wrong. He's actually the dead parrot. Whether he knows it or not, he's now an ex-Prime Minister. But he will leave behind 2 deeply damaging legacies. I hope the dishonesty of his leadership follows him out of the Downing Street door. But the other legacy is that of Brexit. And that will stay. Because I'm sad to say that the Labour Party now fully supports Brexit. Mr. Speaker, Scotland wants a different future, not just a different Prime Minister. So if the Prime Minister won't resign, will he call a general election and allow Scotland the choice of an independent future, free from the control of Westminster?
Effective governance inevitably requires loyalty and collective responsibility. Of course it does. And I'm instinctively a team player. And I have completely focused on governing effectively over the last year. But treading the tightrope between loyalty and integrity has become impossible in recent months. And, Mr. Speaker, I will never risk losing my integrity. I also believe a team is as good as its team captain, and that a captain is as good as his or her team. So loyalty must go both ways. The events of recent months have made it increasingly difficult to be in that team. It's not fair on ministerial colleagues to go out every morning defending lines that don't stand up and don't hold up. It's not fair on my parliamentary colleagues who bear the brunt of constituents' dismay in their inboxes and on their doorsteps in recent elections. And it's not fair on Conservative members and voters who rightly expect better standards from the party they supported. When the first stories of parties in Downing Street emerged late last year, I was personally assured at the most senior level by my Right Honourable Friend's then team that, and I quote, there had been no parties in Downing Street and no rules were broken. So I gave the benefit of doubt. And I went on those media rounds to say that I'd had those assurances from the most senior level of the Prime Minister's team. Then we had more stories. We had the Sue Gray report, a new Downing Street team. I continued to give the benefit of the doubt. And now this week again, we have reason to question the truth and integrity of what we've all been told. And at some point, we have to conclude that enough is enough. I believe that point is now. I welcome the Prime Minister's public acknowledgement last night that matters could have been handled better in who he appointed and what was said about what he knew when. And I appreciated his kind and humble words and his humble spirit when I went to see him yesterday, and also the kind letter that he has sent to me. But I do fear that the reset button can only work so many times. There's only so many times you can turn that machine on and off before you realise that something is fundamentally wrong. Last month, I gave the benefit of doubt one last time. But I haven't concluded that the problem starts at the top. That is not going to change. I have concluded that the problem starts at the top, and I believe that is not going to change. And that means that it is for those of us in a position who have responsibility to make that change.
Can I say to the House, there will be no more personal statements today.
Bye, Boris.